Welcome, Tarl, to episode number 1 of Producers Producing. Thank you for being a willing first guest. I don't want to say victim, but I want to say first participant.
Where that was going?
Yeah, it's an early endeavor. So awesome opportunity to talk to great producers, get to know what they got, how they got into producing, what they're excited about, what kind of challenges they faced, tips and tricks for up and coming producers, and then just any kind of other war stories or favorite tools and just stuff like that. No huge agenda other than a good kind of common conversation around what we do and why we do it. So we'll kind of kick it off with the basics, right? So who are you and where are you at, and how did you get into this crazy field of game production?
Well, first off, thanks for having me. So it's good to catch up with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, my name's Tarl Raney. I am a senior producer for Stray Kite Studios, and I have been in the industry for a long time. I think it'll be 23 years this year.
That's wild. That's awesome.
I started in QA at Nintendo. I was brought in as a outsource testing actually a week before 9/11. So that's how long.
Yeah. And then, I was gonna say our paths first crossed when you were at QA at Monolith. You were leading up. You were head of QA. I don't remember at the time. Was QA project specific, right? So you were the head of QA for Condemned and then Condemned 2.
Right.
But was it for the entire studio or just on that project specifically?
It was just on that project. I was at Monolith. I was hired for the original Condemned, which is a Xbox 360 launch title, as QA lead and associate producer. And then Condemned 2, which is where you came in, right?
Yep.
I was
a short time.
Yeah. I continued QA lead. I was also producer on the multiplayer, and then associate producer on kind of everything, and then even got to do a little design work on the multiplayer, which was kind of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I like to call that out because it's like the only actual anything I've actually produced that wasn't an entire production or whatever. I always thought that the name was a little bit bloated. We produce nothing except everything.
But I think that's funny, and that's part of the reason why I was like, I jokingly call this producers producing because I'm sure you've heard it a million times. I've heard it a million times. I'll probably talk about it on every time I talk with other producers, but I can't tell you how many times people have said to me like, produce me lunch or produce me me something, pizza for crunch or something.
Right.
And so then I was like, and I get that. I've gotten that all throughout my career. It's like, well, what do producers do? And I'm like, well, producers produce. Like we produce there's all sorts of things that we produce, and we run teams, and we ship games, and we get your lunch. Like, what do you need to make this thing happen? So you started in QA.
Yep.
Long trajectory and good path in QA, and then moved into production at Monolith. Did you think you always was that your intent? Like, hey, I want to move into production, or were you just like, hey, I'm going to figure it out, and you had kind of started as QA as your entry point?
Even QA, I completely fell into. I always loved games, and I remember I think it was in high school, I wanted to learn how to make games, and the only thing that really was kind of fitting in high school was a computer programming class. I mean, this would have been early 90s. So Pascal, or I don't even know what it was. It would have been archaic, and I am not good at math, so it was not for me. Plus, the teacher that did that stuff retired right before I would have been eligible to even think about taking that stuff. So it just never really fit for me, or I didn't know enough about how games were made to really know that there was even a path. And then I got my degree in commercial graphics, which was, I did a focus on graphic design, but it was at a Pittsburgh State University in Pittsburgh, Kansas. And it was really more of a focus on print and print management.
Like traditional.
So, and I did not like that side of it, but I was just technical enough with like Photoshop and computers. I mean, the Mac stuff. So I did like I worked in the computer labs and helped sort of maintain all that stuff.
Sure.
And I enjoyed that side of it. And I got my degree, but I didn't deserve it. Like I wasn't a good graphic designer. And
You deserved
well, I
it.
mean,
The funny way to put
we
it.
won't go into all the
Yeah,
problems
yeah.
I have with college degrees in general, but I learned a lot, and I sure I deserved it, but it wasn't. I
Yeah.
was not a graphic designer when I came out of there. Like
Right,
that was just not
right.
the thing. But anyway, so I at one point that was in. I moved up to Kansas City and worked for a little print shop and did sort of not commercial art. What was it called? Production art. Like it was taking
Oh,
other
right.
people's like paper designs and then like building it in all just freehand back then, and then getting it printed on stickers and stuff like that. And I hated that. It was miserable. And
Oh, that
so
sucks.
yeah, I decided to well, I met a friend of yours now in college, Joe Grigsby. Uh,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
yeah, which
forgot we have
I
that
know.
connection. I
Yeah,
totally,
this
yeah,
guy.
that's right.
I actually just caught up with him a couple weeks ago as well, and we were talking about that because I had kind of forgot that connection as well.
Oh, that is
But
so
yeah,
awesome. I've got to catch
but
up with Joe
yeah,
sometime. I will shout him out when I when
yeah,
I post this up.
definitely do. Joe's a great guy. Anyway, he had like started studying kind of on his own web design stuff,
Okay.
and he did some sort of presentation at school on this, and I was like, that looks kind of cool. He showed me a little bit, and then I kind of went off and learned a little bit on my own, and that I never really knew what I was doing or got good at it, but it was fun because it was immediate uh, uh, immediate response. Like you make a change, hit submit, and it like you can see
Right.
what actually happened, and that was actually really fun. So that was kind of what I wanted to do. So I actually, long story, but I moved out to Seattle through like found out some friends from high school, or not even friends, like guys I knew that were a couple of years older than me,
Yeah.
that were like older brothers of friends of mine. They had a place to stay, so I had a free spot, and
That's cool.
found a job doing web design stuff for a little bit, and I hit that .com bubble at the perfect time. Like
Oh, that's awesome.
no, the perfect time to
Oh,
lose your
you
job three times
oh,
in a
the
month.
opposite.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that is not
So
awesome.
yes, it was not. But during that time, I think I had like a month between each of those different jobs, and I think I had a grand total of like 3 months experience in about 4 or 5 months, and then I think almost 9 months of unemployment trying to figure out what I'm going to do because I wasn't really a graphic
Right.
designer. The .com bubble had burst. There weren't a ton of jobs, and this is back in the days of looking in a newspaper to find a job.
Yep.
But I found
Yeah.
there was an ad that just said something like, "Do you want to make money playing video games?" I was like,
You're like,
"Yes, please."
duh.
Called
Of
the
course.
number and they said, "Yeah, show up here Monday morning at such and such a time, and we'll talk to you." And I thought it was just an interview, but basically they lined up all the people that were going to go over to next door to Nintendo and start testing. And I think they had us come back. Maybe it was on a Friday, and they had us come back on Monday. But there wasn't even really an interview. It was like sign some paperwork and
Here you are. Here's the
can you
game.
speak? Good, you're
No
you're good
kidding.
enough. Yeah. And so I showed up that next Monday, and we were it was like 75 people or something, and we were ushered into this big old room with a ton of little CRT TVs and
Yeah.
VCRs on them, and then they brought out this big rack of GameCubes before the GameCube was released, and they were the cartridge ones that had the big old cartridge that you shove down in there, and we started
Big
testing.
like yeah, like big dev units, or were
Yeah,
they
well,
kind of close to the
the unit itself was the same size, but instead of having the little disc tray that popped open, it had this extra piece that was on top, and it was like a three times tall Super Nintendo cartridge.
That's
That
cool.
had a little
Yeah.
handle on the top, and that they'd walk those around and like check them out with you had a number that was yours. The game had a number that was yours. You ever go anywhere near a door with this, you probably get shot.
They were all
That's
watching.
yeah,
Yep,
very
yep.
very secure. And then we just played Luigi's Mansion for 4 weeks or something, 3 or 4 weeks on this. And the way I don't know if all Nintendo games work like this. I kind of assume for the most part they do, but NOA basically does localization. Like the testing,
Okay. Yeah.
there's lot check, which is their certification. They run it through those paces, but it's already been through that in Japan. So there was hardly any bugs to find. Um, I I
That's
think,
so
yeah,
wild.
almost all of it was localization, and once that got once the translation started getting put in, there was lots of bugs
Right.
with that. But so did that for a couple of weeks, and then had a week off, and I had been working at Blue Cross Blue Shield doing data entry, taking
Okay.
forms that people filled out and then typing that into their computer systems because it wasn't all digital yet. Um, very much aging myself here.
Oh my gosh. No, I have had, yeah. It's not about me, but I've had a lot of those odd jobs where it was
Yeah.
like, and then I did this weird
Yep.
thing that you
Right.
youngsters don't have to do at all these days. I had to punch the clock, and then
Yeah.
so yeah.
But yeah, so finished that project, and then they brought me back for Super Mario World something or other. I can't even remember what it was called, but it was the Yoshi, the first time Yoshi was seen, Super Mario World on Super Nintendo, but it was
That's
on
awesome.
the Game Boy Advance.
Okay.
So it was that version
That's
of
so
it.
cool.
Yeah,
Did
and then
when you started there, you said you just showed up and they were like, "All right." Did they tell you like, "Here's what we want you to do and here's what you want to test?" Did you, I mean,
I
now there's so much
yeah
process and
I
formality is not the right word, but it's like very,
right. They
you know.
had, I mean, there was no test plan. And in fact, the first week was clearly, I learned this afterwards. I didn't tell you this, but it was clearly a trial period because after the
Oh,
first
okay.
week, they pared it down to 30 people from 30 or
Right.
40 from, I think it was around 70 or 80. And there was a bunch of people there from the call center and from various other like customer service and stuff from the main Nintendo office that got to do that
Okay.
for a week to help fill those numbers in. And I think they were also being used to kind of help train people on how to play the game and whatnot. But like
Right.
there was one guy, you know, an older guy that obviously had never played a video game in his life, and he couldn't get out of the first room. Like he had a call guy, one of the call center guys next to him, trying to
Right.
explain how the controller works and
Help them
help
out.
him, and he never could get it. And I felt bad for the call center. Well, I felt bad for both of them because the call center guy was like, he's supposed to be doing this, but he's also supposed to be helping and working. And he's getting frustrated. And he's like almost yelling at this poor old guy. And this old guy's like, I don't know what's going on.
Oh my
So that
gosh.
was that was interesting. But yeah, then they pared it down, and from
It's
there they
like
kind of
user experience testing before it was a
to
bigger
a certain
thing, right?
extent,
It's
yeah.
like, I was like, this guy can't figure it out. So
Yeah. But then they pared it down to whatever it was, 30 or 40, and then broke those people into different groups. And I was on the playthrough group. So you could get through the game in about eight, no, it was an 8 hour day, and you could get through the game in about 4 hours,
okay. So
maybe
your job
five.
was
So
to
you could
like
almost get through twice. And we were
front
just
to
like
back.
every day was a new build, and just make sure you can beat the game. And they really didn't care about anything else. And I did not find one bug. Like I there was nothing wrong with the game. Hardly anybody found anything. One guy found something that he could never reproduce, and nobody could reproduce. So it was
So they
basically
were
just
like, just
written off like that.
delete that one out of the
Yeah, pretty
system.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the way we wrote bugs, they had printed out like uh, a printed out Excel sheet, and
And you would handwrite them in.
you were supposed to be recording everything on video. You're supposed to
Right.
reset your tape at 0 at the beginning of the day and just play. And then if you did find a bug, you're supposed to hit pause, write your bug
Log the
in the
timestamp.
thing, log the timestamp, and then wrap the tape in your paper and hand it to one of their leads that was sitting there. And then they
Oh
would
my
take it and put
gosh.
it into whatever their system was.
Well, I mean, that's why the games are so flawless in terms of bugs, is they were like, we don't want to have all these extra papers and VHS tapes to
Yeah, I
look through.
guess.
So
I
this
have no idea.
better be a bug free
Yeah.
experience. That is
But
so crazy.
so the third project I went on, I ended up coming late the first day because I had a flat tire or something, and I showed up a couple hours late, and people were already going. And it was a game that, like, the type of game that I just never play. It was Pikmin, and
Okay.
I was like,
Yeah,
oh
yeah.
crap, they're gonna let me go. I'm not gonna make it.
This is it.
And by the end of it was kind of the point where I was like, I could be good at any game if I just spend time at it. But like by the end of the day, I was on the playthrough team again because I was already able to almost
You
beat
were
the
roasting
game.
it.
Yeah, I
That's
just figured it
hilarious.
out. I'm not good at games by any means, but if you spend enough time at something, you get good enough. So,
Yeah, I was
and
gonna
I
say, if you're
actually,
doing
it also taught me how to test. Like I kept watching, like there were again hardly any bugs in this game, and there was something that happened that one of the leads kind of made an announcement to people, just kind of like a general like, "Hey guys, what you're trying to do here, like you can't go crazy and like push a
Right.
bunch of buttons in a weird order that no one would ever do, and then hit the power button and call it a bug. It's got to be, what would a player actually do that might cause them?" And it was basically, it was what snapped with me was what is a soft lock? Something that it didn't break the game, it didn't stop anything from working, or it didn't stop the game from running, but you can't progress anymore. So I started
Right.
looking at it from that perspective, and I was like, okay, what could I do? And I was like, well, when you start the game, you only have one little Pikmin. What if I lose him somehow? Is there a way to lose him? So I started chucking him off the map, and I found the one spot where you could not, there
You
was
could.
nowhere to get close enough to call him back. And I was like, yeah, I got a bug. And I
Right.
think
That's
that was the
awesome.
only thing I found the whole time, but
And then
I
they
was pretty proud
scolded
of
you. They were
myself.
like, "Stop doing that.
Yeah.
It's enough
No,
of
they
you."
were actually happy with that one.
That's awesome. That's hilarious. So just to fast forward a little bit then. So you're at Monolith, you're on Condemned 2, you say you moved into that AP role, and I think that was
Mhm.
about the time that our paths had crossed as well. So kind of what was I'm curious, what was you were learning all these lessons through QA and you were trying to figure it out for yourself. Like what what of those like lessons applied directly as you stepped into that? I know this is kind of a memory jog, or you could even apply to today, but things where you were like, oh yeah, this totally makes sense, easy transition, or like, ooh, I didn't expect that at all.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to kind of like figure this out.
So from a production standpoint, um, you remember Dave, our boss.
Yeah.
He was, I mean, I don't know what your experience was with him, but I love Dave. I thought he was an amazing mentor to me.
Yeah.
And a lot of that came from when he hired me. The very, like, it was an all day interview. I met with the entire team because I was going to be a lead,
Right.
and his associate producer. So it was a very important position. It had to make sure that you had the cultural fit, the personality fit, and obviously the skills to do the job. But one of the things he did that I thought was amazing, and I've never seen anybody else do this, but at the end of the interview, and in fact, you might have legal issues if you tried this, but he
Right.
he basically he sat me down in his office. He said, "Hey, here's a post-mortem on your interview. Here's the things I think you do well. This is why I would look to hire you, and here's the things that I'm worried about if I do hire you." And he laid it out like very open and honest with me, which was amazing.
That's
And
awesome.
at the
I
end of
love
it,
that. Yeah.
the one problem was I left like, am I getting a job? I don't really
Right. Does that
know.
mean
Yeah.
is there a chance? Are
But
you
then,
saying
yeah.
there's a chance? Yeah.
But then he did. Obviously, I did end up getting the job, and from that point on, he did a really good job. He was a good enough producer that he knew what he was doing and had that team, well run. So he did the bulk of the production work and let me focus on QA. But he brought me in at different points to things that, especially in a larger company or a larger team, an AP is just not going to be around for. They're not going to get
Right.
to
Right.
sit in with the executive producer from the publisher as they're talking about, is this project even going to continue, or what are the main issues with this milestone, and we want to. I don't think. I don't remember on Condemned that there was any real issues, but there was, these were high level conversations
Big
with,
conversations
yeah.
that yeah.
And I mean, like, at one point I saw him, and I wouldn't advocate for this, but not the way he did it, but he basically
Yeah.
slammed his
Yeah.
fist on the table and said, "I'm not doing that. My team's not doing that," and walked out. But what I learned from that was you protect your team. That's your job.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's a right and wrong way to do it, and there's right and wrong time to do that sort of
Of
thing. And
course. Of
I
course.
don't even remember the context of that. I don't think he necessarily did anything wrong, but I don't know if I would have approached it quite that way. But I thought that was actually really interesting. But I got to see so many different things without the pressure of being responsible
For the
for
person
what's
in right.
happening there, right?
Exactly.
So I
Yeah.
got to witness a lot of stuff that gave me a lot of really good lessons without that pressure of screwing everything up.
The
And
person who's gonna be accountable for it. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. And I think the other thing I got from, so the time between when I worked at Nintendo and went to Monolith, I was the company that had placed me at Nintendo, was an
Right.
outsourced test house, and I probably, I probably shipped over 20 or 30 games there, as late stage, like alpha plus testing as an outsource group for various different publishers.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But and in doing that, I got to see obviously a ton of different games, but also got to work with a lot of different teams and see how games are actually made. And some of the early stuff that I did, some of the bugs I wrote were came back as like, well, nobody cares about this. This isn't we're like
Right.
well, part of it was
Will
like
not fix.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, yes, and also we're not at the stage where we're ready to even be testing this, so you shouldn't be
Yeah.
looking at
Yeah.
that or those sorts of things. But then also the different conversations that happened throughout. It wasn't Jira at that point, but it would have been like Test Track Pro or
Test
something.
Track Pro. Yeah.
All the different comments from the people that were working on the bug, you kind of learn how games are put together and the how the sausage is made, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
that was stuff that really helped me in moving forward. And I think why I always, if somebody tells me, their kid is looking to get into video games, they want to be a designer, I'm like, everybody wants to be a designer. Anybody can have a good idea. A designer is not the guy that comes up with fun ideas. It's the one that implements and makes sure it fits with the overall vision and blah, blah, blah. But if you want to go that route, start in QA. That's an easy job to get if you're in an area where you can do that and you have good written and verbal skills and all that stuff. But that will teach you so much of the foundation of how games are made and give you a lot of insight into different areas. And you might realize, oh, I'm actually pretty good at this programming side of things. Maybe that's the direction I want to go. And you still have lots of chances to do design type of work and have good ideas, but you might be more well suited to that sort of thing. So for me, that was a big piece of it, was just getting to see how that sausage was made.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, I was curious how you got into production, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you were brought in to do QA and also, with Dave be an AP for him, and you kind of got that I don't want to say easy ramp in, but you got that support and you got that entry point in, which is awesome. And I think that, I have found personally, I've gone through a couple times in my career where I've had production bosses and producers that were like, I don't even know what to do. And you're like, okay, I'm going to try and figure it out. And I've had ones and hopefully I do this myself where I'm like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. And this is how I'm going to help you. And so, I mean, I think that's a huge advantage and a good, like, really awesome early lesson to learn, because then you like have that kind of click in your head, like, hey, I want to do that
right
for somebody else. Like, I want to be that person as often as I can. I mean, that doesn't mean you're always going to be perfect at it, but it just it's just like you have that mental model to know, like, all right, when I have an AP or a producer or whatever insert level here who is working with me, I need to help do these kind of things.
Yeah.
So then, as you've made your way in your career, I love that interview note. I think that's awesome. I would the right there postmortem. I had not to make it about myself, but I had an old boss who would love to he would do something similar, but like after meetings and stuff. Like as a mentorship, he'd be like, hey, in that meeting, you did this. Yeah. And that was great. But you also said this. And like, you might want to be careful because when you say that, it can be interpreted like this.
Yes.
And it was
Dave did that to me as well. I think that was useful for me as well.
Yeah. Overall, I would say if you're going to have it or not have it, it's great to have, but it can also be, it can be a bit of a roller coaster. So you have to you also have to be kind of you have to have like some tenacity to be like, okay, I can deal with like feedback all the time.
Right.
All the time feedback.
That's true.
And it's a lot. I mean, it can be a lot. And
I was watching you walk down the hall and you could have put your left foot forward just a little bit more.
Right. It was a little bit slow. And that meeting was really important. So next time I'd love to see you pick up the pace. And you're like, why are you watching me walk? But no, I mean, so I think that's awesome. That feedback, that transition from QA and those things you took away. Have there been any other, you've had such a long career in gaming, you've been in production for so long. Anything else that kind of sticks out to you? You talked about like, if you want to get into gaming and even if you want to get in, production specifically, good entry points being QA. Are there any other kind of areas or ways that you think somebody who is either early in production in their career or even just thinking about it, where you're like, hey, here's a good way to kind of grow into that, or here's some skills and here's some things that I would really look for?
Again, I don't know that it's necessarily production specific, but I think for anyone that wants to get into the game industry, it's. I mean, I don't know that this is exclusive to the game industry, but like I don't know how a plane is made,
Right.
and a plane is not something I
Yeah.
can go out and. I mean, maybe you can buy some really intricate models, or I'm sure there's tons of YouTube videos at this point in time,
Right.
but I one of the things I've done, like I've done this for. I mean, I remember making Doom 2 levels with the WAD editor in college.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you know, I am not I'm not a professional game developer in that perspective. Obviously, I am as a producer, but I think one other thing that has helped me is my love for games. And like you were saying, I think before we started recording, that you want to have some sort of creative outlet. And for
Yeah.
me, I've for it's been holy crap, it's been 14 years, I think. Since, well, no, it's a little less than that. When I went back to Berlin the second time, which would have
Right.
been 2013.
That was with Jaeger, was
Yeah,
it?
with Jaeger, and
Yeah. Okay.
they were one of the very early adopters of Unreal 4, and
Okay.
Unreal has 4 and 5 have that blueprint system, which
Mm-hmm.
is, I mean, it's programming, but it's visual. And
Yep.
that, like, when I first saw it, it scared me, and somebody told me it's like Visual C++. I'm like, no way. But then I started learning it. I freaking
And
love
you're
it.
like, oh,
I spend so much time on that. I've built so many different. I have this one game that's basically just like a collection of different features or mechanics that you would find in all these
right.
other games. Just like
That's
I'll
awesome.
play a new game, I'm like, oh, I bet I can make that, and then I go have fun making that and kind of
No
put it all
kidding.
together. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that to me that really helped in the same ways. Like I, I've said this in interviews before recently. Like I've done just about every like specialty of production that exists.
Yeah.
Uh, Probably not everyone. I'm sure there's some weird ones out there that I haven't touched or anything. But I've done almost
Always
everything,
something.
and I've been a producer for teams that touch every single discipline. So I've got a
Right.
really
You had a
well-rounded
wide
view of how
range.
that work is done, even if I don't fully understand it. Like I know what skinning and weighting is. I couldn't explain to
You
you
couldn't
what
do
it
it.
means,
Yep.
or I certainly couldn't do it. But I
Yeah.
understand well enough, and I think that's the really long-winded way of getting back to your question. But understanding the more intricate details of how a game is made, because a lot of the things that I've found that I've problems that I've been asked to solve as a producer were things where a really good example, and I always use this in interviews, but we had at one company I worked for, I won't throw anybody under the bus. We
Yep.
had this real bad bottleneck where rigging, weighting, and basically the technical animation was kicking out all this work over basically just throwing it over the fence to
Right.
animators, and animators were bogged
Having to
down with
clean
having.
it up and
Exactly. They were having to do all this cleanup of, naming conventions and setting everything up in the proper hierarchical structure and all that sort of stuff. And
which animators love to do traditionally.
exactly, yeah, that's
No, I'm just
basically what they got into animation for, right?
kidding.
And what we, in kind of investigating this whole thing, realized that uh, that there was way more time available to the technical animators to do that work, so that when it got to the animator, they could actually start animating. And so we just changed up the process and said, okay, we're moving this chunk of work back down the chain. You're going to do this. It's going to take you a little bit more time. You're going to have to be a little more diligent, but you're the one setting it up anay, so it makes the most
So
sense
it makes
anyway.
right,
And
right.
so,
You're
and
already in there.
that fixed that that bottleneck to a certain extent. I mean, obviously didn't make everything perfect, but the cool thing about that though was I learned something about that process, and we were able to sort of inform the rest of the team how this process goes. And so I think so many times I mean, how many people have you worked with that don't even play games, right?
I
It's
surprisingly
exactly
a
right.
surprisingly large amount.
Yeah. And so when in the same way, like you're a guy that has been in the game industry for 15 years and you're an amazing technical animator, but you don't know what happens with the object that you're working with when you're done with it. That doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense to me. Like that's everybody should have a general understanding of the order of
What
operations
that pipeline looks
and
like,
yeah,
and
exactly. All
right,
those pipelines,
right.
all those workflows, how all that stuff comes together. And you get rid of a lot of the sort of misinformation or not mis. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but basically, people. I always used to hear the comment. I think it was at Monolith. People would say, "Well, content can't break the bill." Whatever.
Right.
Content can break anything. Like anything can
Yeah, I
break
was gonna say.
anything, right? Like
Yeah.
that, and it's those sort of like little, and far more technical people will explain to you exactly what's going on and everything.
What it,
I don't
right.
need to know that
Why it
though,
did or
but
what it can.
right,
Yeah.
but I understand that is a stupid statement, and I will say in a much nicer way, that's not exactly the
Right.
case.
I don't
We need
think
to be a little
so.
careful here. Let's not just go checking a ton of stuff in at the the day before the milestone or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and I feel like too, you're talking about like learning blueprints and learning all that, and getting your hands dirty with that. Nowadays there are so many more avenues for, um, not just like education in game development, like schools that cater to it, but you can just start making, like you were saying, you can just start
Right.
making content for
Yeah.
UGC. You can start, like not just modding something, but you could actually put something out into a marketplace that is
Yeah.
a game and that
Yeah.
you could monetize and you could make money
Well,
off of it. So
and yeah,
I think
like
that is a good way to learn, right?
yeah, and like the Fortnite, you literally just worked on this a couple months ago. The UEFN,
Oh,
Unreal
yeah,
Engine,
yep,
and Fortnite. Like, there's
yep,
everything you need is right there. All you have to do is learn their new coding language, the first stuff to
yeah,
actually make stuff happen. And that can be even very minimal. You can make a pretty simple, some sort of platformer sort of thing that you don't really need a whole bunch of code other than this is the end of the level and here's a trigger to say how fast you did it and that type of stuff. So you can do some really simple stuff that just kind of ramp up and start to understand how all those things come together. And
yeah.
at this day and age, YouTube and there's a million cajillion content creators out there that will teach you anything you want to know.
Anything you want to know.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you just have to
I
take the
think
time.
Yeah, and I think it makes a lot of sense because I think from understanding how a game is potentially made from almost like a like not tactical is not the right word, but like the nuts and bolts of it. You could
Yeah.
probably learn a lot of that on your own. You can mod. I think where it comes that next part where it gets where you need that on the job part is like, well, what is it like to work with a team? What is it like
Right.
to like manage my expertise with others, or what is it like to lead others, and what's it
Yeah.
like to deal with crazy with what's it like to deal with difficult people or difficult publishers and difficult
Right.
relationships and stuff. And so that's
That's the
that
fun
that
part.
that's the fun part. Yes, yeah, that's for a future
Yeah.
podcast with Tarl. Will be more of the some of the battle stories
War
from those,
stories.
because
Yeah.
I bet you have a few fun ones for sure. Um, so I'll edit this, but for the sake of time, one thing that I know you've probably gone through this in the past of in being interviewed and also interviewing other producers. So what type of producer are you? And I say that because I do believe that not all producers are cut from the same cloth. Everybody's kind of different in how they
Yeah.
manage or what they're not just what they're good at, but also what their style is.
Right.
So, if you had to kind of label yourself or put yourself in an archetype, you're a
I
D&D character.
I don't play D&D, so I don't know if I can
I don't
I
play a
can
lot
do
of
that
D&D
one.
either, so it's not good for me
Yeah.
to use that as a reference point.
But I would. I've never really thought about this in those terms until you sent me Sorry, behind the scenes here, he sent me
No, this still
a
is no,
question
yeah.
early, but
No, I think you got to give people a heads up
yeah,
just so
exactly.
you know what we're
But
going to talk about.
I did kind of think about that a little bit, and I mean, as stupid as this sounds, I'm just the get her done type of person. Like
Yeah.
and I answer this question in interviews all the time. Like I literally had somebody in an interview once ask me, like with a straight face, what is the best production methodology and why? I was like, there isn't one. There's
Right.
Everybody is different. Every team is
No.
different. You do something that works amazing here. You take that exact same thing and try and use it with a different group of people, and it falls flat on its face.
Yep.
I'm
100%.
I'm very pragmatic and practical. What do we need to get done? How do you want to do it? I don't. I have as a producer, I have very little uh, care in how things get done. And my job in and of itself is to make sure that you guys can get your job done. It's my job to facilitate and communicate. I'm supposed to make sure that you are
Yep.
not blocked from being the best animator that you can be. You need information on what these animations should look like, where they need to go, where they get checked in, all those sorts of things. It's my job to help facilitate those things happen. So it's just putting 2 or 20 people together in a room and saying, figure it out. The only thing I really care about is, and this depends on the job, the company, the publisher, all the
Absolutely.
different things.
Yep.
But the only
There's
thing I
so
care
many
about is
factors that
I
go into
have
it.
to, at some point, be able to tell someone how things are going.
Right.
So if you've got a giant team, you need something like Jira. You need all sorts of tools to be able to kick out all these graphs and diagrams and stuff to show how we're doing, how we're tracking,
Yep.
all that sort
Absolutely.
of stuff. If you're 3 guys, you can do it in post-it notes.
Yep.
And you can say, well, yeah, this is going to take a little longer than we thought, and let's move those other post-it notes off the board for now, or whatever.
Right.
Like
Yep.
that side of it doesn't matter to me. And you have to be able to work with a team to find something that they're comfortable with and that they're willing to use. If you over process something, no one wants to use it, including
Yeah.
producers, because
Yeah.
it's the equivalent of a TPS cover sheet.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
this is stupid. It makes no sense. Why are we doing it? Well, corporate said we have to. Well, guess what corporate can do?
Yep. Well, and then, and I think there's like levels all over the place of that, depending on where you're at, or depending
Yeah.
on what project you're on, or what the publisher wants, or the partner wants, and all of that. But I I too tend to, I always follow like a people first kind of,
Yeah.
mantra of being a producer. So if there are always frameworks or ideas that I have or opinions that I have, I mean, I'm same for you. You have a lot of experience. So you're going to have a point of view. You're going to have a perspective.
Right.
But it's first and foremost like, does this work for you all?
Right.
Is this helping? And if it's not, let's modify it. And then if there is nothing there, well, let's start easy.
Right.
Let's wade into it with some easy ways, not
Yeah.
a over the top way. And so you get that buy-in, get that trust, and then modify it. I mean, I
Yeah.
do agree. It depends on the team size. But I've often found like it can't be nothing.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. There's probably situations where it could be, but I mean,
Yeah.
get something in there, lightweight, get something that you can evolve, get
Yeah.
something that helps to drive conversation and helps to solve problems,
Yeah.
but mostly gets out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. That, like, and again, in the interview question, that's generally how I answer. I said, if nothing exists, I'd probably just start with Scrum because it's well documented and it's intended to be iterated upon. So
Yeah.
start with the basics and then figure out what works for you, what doesn't, and iterate from there. But if something already exists, I'm not going to come in and change everything. That would be, I mean, how cocky would I have to be to think I know better than you? And to
Right.
come in and just change everything because, well, this is the way I used to do it. No.
Yeah.
Let's look at what you're doing. Where are your bottlenecks? Where are communication breakdowns? All that sort of stuff, and then you start to kind of just plug away at fixing
At
fixing
fixing
those
those
little
gaps.
issues. Yeah.
Yeah.
But and for me, like, I hate meetings. I I I understand that they're necessary sometimes, but so many companies like, oh, I got a question. Let's all have a meeting. And 20
Right.
people are piled in a room and 2 people are talking. Like, why is everybody here? This is stupid.
Right. You could have just
Yeah,
done this on Slack or sent them like
exactly.
a quick Loom video or something and just
Yeah,
ask them what they wanted. Just video record it
yeah.
if you want.
So yeah, I'm very much against process for process sake, and even process that is necessary should be as minimal as possible to get the job done.
Yeah.
I just
Oh,
it's such a waste of time in so many cases, and it it causes additional complexity, which is going to slow down the actual work that needs to get done.
the actual thing that you're doing, which is
Yeah,
making a game, making an
exactly.
awesome product.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, yeah, I tend to agree, and I do feel like if there's nothing there, and I have done this myself too, so it's not a you tend to put in maybe too much where you're like, all right, well, now we're doing daily stands and then we're
yep,
doing, and we're going to do a 2 week sprint and we do this retro and maybe that doesn't work. Or maybe the team is like, we're having too many meetings. And you're
right,
like, okay, fine. Well, we'll have less meetings, right?
exactly.
I always ask, I always say when I'm working with a team, like, you know, let, if you can give me some trust and give me some, an opportunity to like iterate through this with me, you be honest with how it's going, and
Yeah,
we'll get through it together, because not everything you do is at any part of making a game is always going to be the exact right thing. Well,
right.
maybe I should rephrase that, but there will be times that it is but like, it's part of being a team, and part of going through that development is that you can say like,
Right.
hey, listen, we don't have anything, so let's try this.
Yeah,
If it's too heavy, too much, and we have too many meetings, maybe the team loves getting together every morning because they're all remote and it's the only time they
yeah,
all talk to each other, or they're, and they need that. And so it could be a waste of time,
right.
but it's a good bonding, and they all love it. So you kind of leave it as is because it
Yeah,
helps in other ways. Right. But
yeah.
yeah, I know
Yeah,
what you're
that I
saying.
mean that's I think that's
Process.
a very good point, that it's not everything is intended to move the product forward. Sometimes it is just, let's all be on the same page, let's get to know each other, build that camaraderie, because that when things get nuts at the end of a project, or
Right.
that hopefully we aren't crunching and all that sort of stuff, but
Yeah.
it is going to get nuts at some point, whether it's working long hours or it's just really stressful because we've got deadlines to hit and things aren't working or whatever. You need to know who you're in the trenches with, who you can, how they like to work, what type of personality they are, so that you're not suddenly meeting these people for the first time when you're you know a year and a half into a project, and you're like, oh, that guy doesn't like to be talked to when he's got his headphones on.
Yeah. Yep. Yep, absolutely. I mean, there's always times, in any kind of creative project, creative endeavor, um, especially in games, where you're like, hey, I need to lean into a little bit of, into this with you to help the project,
Yeah,
or vice versa. Like, hey, I need to do this for you or for the team, and you have that bond, right? You have that
yeah.
kind of, you've been going through it together. So I know we're like, I'll edit this part too. We're like super over. So I do want to ask if you have any favorite, do you have any favorite kind of go-to tools as a producer, things that could be personal? Like, hey, I love using OneNote to take my notes, and that's been amazing. And my favorite tool for a team is X. Any go-to kind of productivity.
Eh, I mean, uh, I don't know that. I mean, okay, so
If you don't, that's
I'm gonna
valid.
kind of get myself in trouble here.
Oh no.
Not really, but uh, currently, the group that I'm working with is using something called ClickUp,
Okay,
and
I've heard of it.
I love it for my own personal stuff. I've been trying to get my wife to use it so that we can keep track of all the crap I got to do around the house and things like that.
Right, you
But
manage your
like
own to-do
for
list.
yeah, and it's really, I mean, it's really robust. You can have lots of different lists for things, so you can break things out the way you want, all this sort of stuff. But we're using it with a much larger team, trying to use it in a similar way to like Jira, and it just doesn't work that way.
Not built for that.
So
Right.
that one's kind of difficult. So for personal, like even just personally tracking my own work stuff, I
Yeah.
love ClickUp because I just know how it works. You can look at it in a list view, you can look at it in a Kanban view, a ton of different actually
Yeah.
different views of the same data, and I really like that. Jira is industry standard, and everybody's got their love hate relationship with it.
Yep.
There's
Yep.
some really great things about it, especially if you go use something else and you're like, oh my god, where's where are all these things?
I
Um,
know a lot of big fans, and
yeah,
I know a few people who are definitely not as well.
right.
So yeah.
And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with just methodologies. It's it has to be able to scale, and just
Yeah.
some things just don't work. They work great when you got a 20-person team, and then all of a sudden you double that and it's just not going to work. So you've got to be willing to make those changes. um, Honestly, beyond that, I can't think of anything that I
If you had your
particularly
way,
love.
if you had to move the team to a new tool, or if you were like, hey, tomorrow they're like, all right, Tarl, we need to reboot how we're looking at our work and how we're managing it, you would put them into
Well,
Jira.
yeah, it would be Jira. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so industry standard at this point. It's going to be way easier to onboard new people. It's got the majority of the tools that you need to be able to track work and filter things out and look at it in different ways and all that sort of stuff.
Right. Right.
It's got its weirdness, and it's got some limitations, and it's unfortunate that it seems to be like the only option. So it doesn't have a ton of competition. So there's bugs and feature requests that have been sitting around for 12
That
years
just
in their
are there
backlog.
forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that type of stuff is annoying, but I don't know what else I would use
Yeah.
if I wasn't going to use that.
Yeah, I got turned on, and it's funny because for those that know me well, they'll be like, oh, you're paid by them. That's why I always say it. But I've been a huge fan of Favreau. I transitioned some of the teams when I was at Congruent onto that. As also a very much so a love hate relationship with that for other users. I personally have really loved it because it is built for game development, but it's also like Trello on steroids.
Is it spelled like
But
John Favreau?
yeah, Favro, and
Oh, okay.
I will just say, because I don't want to. I trust me. Anybody that I know that hears this will be like, of course she's mentioned that, because I do really like the tool and I love the team. They're super responsive. They are always working on features that will get on the phone and help walk you through use cases or setups. It is meant for game dev.
Okay.
It's worth checking out if you do ever want. And trust me, this is not the point of this, but when we're talking about tools, because you also mentioned that love hate. I've had a lot of people who are like, I just don't like it, and other people are
Right.
like, oh, it's fine. But
Yeah.
you and I have been in this industry for a long time. I don't think I've ever used a single tool. It doesn't matter what it is, where people are like,
Yeah.
this is fantastic. I
Right.
love it. It's like an insert thing,
Yeah.
and half the team hates it and half the team loves it. It
And
doesn't matter.
it's always a grass is greener on the other side. We need to move to something else, whatever this thing
Yep.
is. It's like, okay, what if we do
Yeah.
that? Are you going to like that? I guarantee you're going to hate half of it too.
Right. Yep.
If I had a smaller team, I would look at using another tool that I cannot think of the name all of a sudden. Codex.
Okay. I've never heard of it.
Codecks.io, I believe. Excuse me. It's a web based thing. It's sort of developed. Sorry.
Uh-oh. Fix it in post.
Yeah. I've been talking too much.
No, this is okay.
A friend of mine actually created or kind of came up with the concept and worked
that's
with
cool.
worked with a web developer to kind of make it. But it's based on the idea. My buddy who created it, he loves board games and specifically collectible card games, and so he kind of built it around the idea of building a deck. So basically, I think the idea of the app itself is like everything goes in is just basically data. These are individual chunks of this. A card is the same as a Jira task or whatever
Right.
a single
Yep.
entity is. But then you basically layer on top of that the different filters that you want to see, and it presents them in a card fashion. It's actually,
Cool.
it got picked up, purchased by some other friends of mine that were from Jaeger that broke off and started their own little indie studio. I can't remember the name of it. It's in German, and I probably wouldn't pronounce it right anyway. But they made the game.
I won't make you try.
Yeah, and I can't even remember the name of their game. I apologize, guys. But they picked it up, and they've been developing it and selling it through their company. And I think it's fairly popular in sort of the German indie scene, and it's in English and everything.
Yeah.
It's actually
I'll have to check it out.
it looked really cool, and I thought it would be for smaller teams. I think it would work really well. I'm not sure it's really built for.
You're not sure how it scale.
Bigger teams, but
yeah,
it's worth taking a peek.
Awesome. I'll have to check that out. Well, any other parting words? Anything else?
No.
You all right? I'm going to let you have your coughing, your coughing fit. Tarl's been awesome catching up with you today. I appreciate you being the first of what I hope will be many producers to have on, because I think it's just I've been in it for a long time. I love production. I am a producer's producer, so I love talking with other people, and you pick up little tips and tricks, and just like hearing ways that other people approach problems. I think it's awesome, and I would love to have more of that opportunity to like have that kind of common production guild where we can kind of share more knowledge and stuff like that. And it doesn't always have to be project specific. You don't have to tell me what your game right now is doing and how it's doing it. I want to know who you are and what you do and why you do it. So
this is a ton of fun. I'm looking forward to seeing other people you talk to.
Thanks again, Tarl. I really appreciate you being on episode 1, and let's do another one in the future.
Sounds good. Thank you. This is fun.
Thank you.